Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The moment hit harder than any blast he'd faced in Kandahar. Nolan Briggs stared at the crayon drawing taped to the fridge. A child's sketch of Mommy, me, and Uncle Reed. Trina stood between them in the drawing, holding hands with both. Smiling. No, Daddy. He didn't move. Just stared at it. His 6-year-old niece, Autumn, had spent the weekend at their house. She'd begged to play with Trina's markers. "Can I draw your family?" she'd asked with innocent excitement. Nolan had smiled and nodded, thinking nothing of it. Now he saw what she saw, what she'd accidentally exposed. He didn't speak as Trina walked in from the hallway, tossing keys into the dish and unzipping her coat. "Hey, babe. Dinner or DoorDash?" she asked, not noticing the drawing at first. Nolan stepped aside. "This yours?" Trina glanced at it. Froze. Her body stiffened just enough for him to catch it. Trained eyes, always watching. "Oh," she said, forcing a small laugh. "Autumn's drawings are wild, huh? Why isn't Dad in the picture?" She probably forgot. "And Reed? Why is he holding your hand?" Trina hesitated, then smiled too widely. "She's 6, Nolan. Kids draw weird stuff. Don't overthink it." He nodded, slowly. "Right." But his hands clenched just slightly at his sides. A tiny shake in his breath. Controlled. Contained. Trina didn't notice. Or didn't care. She walked past him to the kitchen, humming. The betrayal didn't explode. It bled, slow, invisible, steady. In that moment, Nolan knew something was wrong. And not just the affair. Something deeper. Something bigger. The soldier in him didn't react with emotion. He responded with precision. He walked to the basement. Picked up a small box marked tools. Inside, a listening device, a pinhole camera, and a USB cloner. If Trina thought he was still the man she could lie to, she forgot who she married. But what else had she been hiding? "Wait, I need to tell you something important. Have you ever realized that you keep watching my videos but haven't subscribed yet? This video has reached this point, which means you're enjoying it. So why not subscribe? I have a big goal, 10,000 subscribers, and you can help me reach it. Think about it. If you don't subscribe now, you might miss my next big video. This is the moment. Hit that subscribe button now. Do it now. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss out. I know you'll do it. And when we hit 5,000 subscribers, I have a special surprise for you. Now let's continue story. 3 days later, Nolan sat in his truck across from Mercer and Lowell Legal Group. Engine off, eyes scanning behind polarized lenses. He watched as Reed Mercer exited the building, laughing into his phone, crisp suit sharp in the morning sun. Arrogance on full display. Nolan didn't move, didn't flinch. Inside the truck, his tablet showed a mirrored backup of Trina's phone. He cloned it quietly the night after the drawing. Text messages lit up the screen. "Trina, he's been so quiet lately. Think he suspects." Reed, "Nah. He's clueless. Probably just depressed again." "Trina, let's just get through the gala. After that, we'll figure it out." The casual cruelty in her words didn't sting. Not anymore. They ignited something colder. He zoomed in on a photo Trina had sent, her in Mercer's office, legs on his desk, sipping from a whiskey glass. The timestamp matched a day she told Nolan she was volunteering at the shelter. His finger hovered over the screen, then tapped save. He made notes, patterns, names, burner numbers. Next, he drove to his buddy Seth's garage. Seth was ex-NSA, now working private cyber contracts. Inside, the lights flickered. The hum of quiet servers buzzed around them. "You sure you want to go this route?" Seth asked. Nolan placed a flash drive on the table. "Need everything decrypted and mirrored. No leaks." Seth looked at the contents. "This is surveillance on your wife?" "Not just her." Nolan explained what he'd seen: texts, money transfers, patterns. There was more to this than cheating. Reed's name appeared on business accounts Trina had no business being attached to. Donations. Hidden shells. Government names. "This isn't just personal, man," Seth muttered. "This is criminal-level laundering." "I know," Nolan replied. Calm. Steady. "I'm not here to yell. I'm here to end them." But how deep did this rot go? At home, Trina kissed his cheek like nothing was wrong. She smelled like lavender and wine. Her smile came too easy now. Nolan matched it. Warm eyes, steady voice. Long day? She asked. Yeah, he said. Long week. She rubbed his shoulder. Maybe we should plan that cabin trip we talked about? He nodded slowly. Yeah, let's. Inside, Nolan was scanning every word, every movement. She scrolled her phone while half watching a reality show. He noted her second device tucked into the throw pillow. A burner. Hidden, but sloppy. She wasn't scared. She was careless. That night, while she showered, he unlocked the burner with a cloned fingerprint patch. Messages confirmed everything: locations, financial drops, meetings labeled donor pitch. Not an affair. A side hustle built off stolen veteran identities. His name was listed in a contract. Someone had impersonated him to secure military funds for a fake nonprofit. A vet charity reads firm sponsored. She got out of the shower wrapped in a towel. You okay? She asked, seeing him in the dark. Nolan smiled. Yeah, just thinking. She leaned in. Still worried about work? Not anymore, he said. I've got a plan now. Her lips curled into a small smirk, not knowing it wasn't about his job. That night, Nolan lay beside her in silence, hearing her slow breaths as she drifted off. His eyes stayed open. She was a stranger now, but she'd made one mistake. She forgot who she married. And the next time she smiled in his face, it'd be for the cameras. The Mercer and Lowell charity dinner was held in a sleek glass-paneled venue overlooking downtown Raleigh. Crystal chandeliers, servers in tuxedos, violinists playing covers of pop songs, everything looked polished. Perfect. Fake. Nolan adjusted his cuffs in the mirror of the men's room before entering the ballroom. Black suit. Clean shave. The soldier was back, but this time, his enemy wasn't holding a rifle. It was holding a glass of wine. Trina had insisted he come. Said it would be good for his spirits. Reed Mercer spotted them from across the room and grinned like a game show host. Trina's fingers curled loosely around Nolan's arm as they approached. Nolan. Reed clasped his hand like they were old friends. Glad you made it, man. Nolan's grip tightened for just a beat longer than necessary. Wouldn't miss it. Trina smiled between them. Too bright. Too comfortable. Reed led them to a table full of local officials and donors. He bragged about veteran outreach programs, referencing Nolan's past like a prop in his performance. I tell you, guys like Nolan, they're the real heroes. We just try to help him transition. The table clapped politely. Nolan smiled back. Yeah, that transition's been enlightening. Trina gave him a quick glance, tight, unreadable. The servers brought wine. Reed toasted to restoring integrity to public service. Nolan sipped water. When the dessert came, Trina leaned toward Reed and whispered something. Nolan caught it. Next board meeting. He won't be there. His pulse didn't change, but his eyes tracked everything. Later, in the parking garage, Nolan watched from a distance as Trina and Reed shared a brief kiss inside her car, quick, discreet, rehearsed. She didn't even look guilty. From the shadows, Nolan spoke softly to himself. One step closer. But what exactly were they planning behind those boardroom doors? Nolan sat alone in his garage, the walls lined with memories, military plaques, photos of his unit, folded flags. But tonight, it all felt like part of another man's life. His laptop screen displayed Trina's phone logs. He watched in silence as messages rolled in from contacts labeled with initials, burner numbers, and code-named donors. He wasn't just betrayed. He was used. Her voice echoed in his head from earlier. He won't be there. She was planning to remove him. Legally, financially, maybe even frame him if needed. This wasn't just an affair. It was an erasure. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an old challenge coin, turned it between his fingers, then placed it down. Time for emotion was over. He opened a private chat window with Seth. Nolan. Need a trace on IP 47.22.118.19. Might be a contract server. Also, check if Trina Briggs is registered on any private boards or NGOs in DC. Minutes later, Seth replied. Seth, oh man. You're not gonna like this. Attached, a screenshot of a registered agent listing. Trina Briggs, Executive Consultant, Valor United Veterans Foundation. filed under a corporate umbrella tied to Reed Mercer's firm. Problem? That foundation didn't exist 6 months ago. It now had $2.3 million in federal funding. Nolan stared at the screen, controlled rage tightening his jaw. She used his service, his trauma, his name, to steal. He picked up his phone, called an old contact at the Office of Veterans Affairs. "Doug, it's Nolan. I need you to look into something." Quietly. There was a long pause on the other end. "You found something?" "I think I've got a fraud ring using disabled vets as their front. I want to burn it to the ground." Now it wasn't just revenge. It was justice. Sunday morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows. Trina hummed a light tune, flipping pancakes, barefoot in one of Nolan's old army shirts, like a scene from a magazine. He watched her from across the room, arms folded. Not a muscle moved on his face. She turned. "You're staring. You look good in that shirt," he said. She smiled and walked over, planting a kiss on his cheek. "Told you we'd find our rhythm again." Nolan kissed her back. Gently. A little too long. He needed her to believe this. Every fake smile, every nod, every "I'm okay" had to be real enough. Because tonight, she'd be meeting with Reed at The Mill, a closed restaurant they used as a front. He had the location from a voice memo she didn't know synced to the cloud. Later that night, parked in the shadows, Nolan watched through a long lens. Inside, Reed handed her a manila folder. She scanned it, nodded. They exchanged USBs like spies in a Cold War film. She laughed at something he said. Nolan zoomed in. Her eyes lit up in a way they hadn't with him in years. That look? That laugh. She never gave him that anymore. He clicked the shutter. Got everything. The next day, Trina texted him, "Lunch today? I miss you." He replied, "Would love that." She didn't know he'd already sent the USB copy to Doug, or that federal tracking had started on Valor United's bank account. She didn't know her perfect act had started to crack. She didn't know Nolan was weeks away from ripping her mask off, for good. She thought she were the mask. She didn't know he'd already taken his off. The night before the next board meeting, Nolan sat in the living room, TV on mute, pretending to scroll through a sports app. Trina sat opposite him with her legs tucked beneath her, typing furiously on her second phone, the one she always kept for work emergencies. She'd grown bolder, too comfortable. She didn't hide the smirks between texts now, didn't glance over her shoulder anymore. He watched her, quiet. The TV's glow cast flickers on the wall behind her, like shadows of someone else. Someone she used to be. "You sleeping in the guest room again tonight?" she asked, eyes still on her screen. "Thinking about it," he replied. She didn't press, didn't even look up. That told him everything. Nolan waited until she was asleep, then opened his laptop and checked the mirrored feed. Reed had sent Trina a document titled Board Strategy, Phase 2. Inside, a series of memos outlined their push to acquire a new veterans housing project. Government-funded. 8 figures. Nolan recognized a signature on one of the forms. His. Forged. She'd used his military record to authenticate the bid. He leaned back in his chair, breathing slow. No outburst. No broken glass. Just silence. He saved the file and sent it to Doug at the VA. Subject, Phase 2. Her prints are all over it. Attached, a zip folder of documents. Timestamped. Verified. The silence wasn't weakness. It was war drums underwater. In the hallway, Trina turned in her sleep, mumbling something. He watched her from the doorway, her face peaceful, undisturbed. She thought she had him beat. Thought silence meant surrender. She didn't know silence was the sound of the storm forming. And when it broke, there'd be nothing left standing. The coffee shop sat tucked between a dry cleaner and an old pawn shop. Low-key, quiet, exactly how Nolan needed it. Across from him sat Mason Rudd, former squad mate, now security chief for a private defense firm. Bald, tattooed hands, eyes that had seen war and worse. "She used your record to validate fake outreach contracts?" Mason asked, scanning the folder Nolan slid across the table. "Twice," Nolan confirmed. "Third's coming next month if we don't stop it." Mason flipped a page. "She listed you as board advisor. Even added your Silver Star citation." Nolan sipped his black coffee. "She knows just enough about the system to make it look clean." Mason tapped the table. "Want me to go loud?" No, I want them to think they've won. He laid out the plan. Seth tracking every wire transfer, Doug opening a quiet fraud case at the VA, Mason pulling surveillance access to the nonprofit's headquarters. This ain't just about her anymore, is it? Mason asked. No, it's about everyone they've stepped on. Every name on that donor's list is a stolen story. Mason nodded. All right then. Full ghost protocol. Full ghost. They shook on it. Two veterans, no longer in uniform, but still fighting. Outside, Nolan watched a nearby billboard flash an ad for Valor United. Reed's face beamed on it. Trina's name was in small print beneath. They were already branding themselves as saviors, as heroes, and the public was buying it. Nolan turned away, pulling his hood up. This wasn't the time for headlines. That would come later, when the billboard collapsed under the weight of truth. One more signature, one more lie, and they'd bury themselves. Trina's routines had become a performance she didn't realize had an audience. She left for her meetings every Thursday afternoon at 3:45. Said she was consulting with a rehab center across town. But her car always ended up parked behind the mill, the shuttered restaurant where Valor United had staged private donor events. Nolan followed twice. Watched from a block away, camera rolling. Inside the house, he'd installed 3 new listening devices. One in the vent above the bedroom, one behind the hallway mirror, and one under her desk drawer. He made them sensitive enough to catch whisper-level conversation. That week, Trina returned home humming, set down her bag, and placed her keys on the granite counter. Nolan was already there, sipping tea. Calm. You good? She asked, peeling off her blazer. Great, he smiled. Got a lead on a new project. Oh? Something exciting. Could be. Might involve some restructuring. She laughed, not catching the weight in his voice. That night, Nolan played back the audio. Trina and Reed had discussed Phase 3. They'd already signed paperwork in Nolan's name to secure another $1.2 million grant from the state. She even practiced his signature, mocking his slow, left-handed scrawl. They laughed. He didn't blink. The next morning, Nolan dropped a sealed package at the door of a local journalist. Inside, copies of the forged grant files, Valor United's real donor records, and photos of meetings held under the table. He didn't include his name. Not yet. Back home, Trina curled up beside him on the couch, phone in hand. Thinking about rebranding the nonprofit soon, she said casually. Something more national. Nolan nodded. Go big or go home, right? She laughed again. But she was sitting on a house full of tripwires, and every room was wired to blow. The house was rigged, and she'd lit the fuse herself. Trina had started talking about therapy again. I really think you should go back, she said gently over dinner. You've been distant. Nolan nodded, picking at his plate. Maybe. You used to have nightmares. You don't even flinch anymore. That's not healing, Nolan. That's numb. He let her talk. Let her believe her guilt was working. But the truth was simpler. He'd gone silent because he wasn't hurting anymore. He was watching. The next morning, Nolan walked into the VA clinic and signed in under an alias. He wasn't here for help. He was here to meet Doug in the hallway near records. Doug slipped him a flash drive. Internal audit reports. The payments under Valor United are triggering red flags. You've got less than a month before someone higher up starts sniffing around. Good, Nolan replied. Let them come. At home, he stayed quiet. Started wearing the same 3 shirts. Ate less. Slept on the couch. Let Trina think she was winning. She left more openly now. Barely hid the burner phone. Left receipts in her bags. He found one. Dinner for 2 at a restaurant 3 hours from home. Dated the same night she said she was attending a virtual grief support webinar. Instead of confrontation, Nolan wrote it down. Logged the miles on the car. Matched timestamps to the bank withdrawals. He wasn't just collecting receipts. He was building a timeline. One solid enough to break careers. And Trina? She thought she'd broken him. She didn't know she was walking through a minefield. And the click of the trigger was already behind her. Nolan had always been the quiet guy in the friend circle. Steady. Reliable. The one who showed up early to help set up and left late to clean up. Now, most of them treated him like a ghost. At a small backyard barbecue, he noticed it. A sideways glance here. A pitted nod there. Trina's best friend, Jess, pulled him aside. Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, but she says you've been distant. Like, checked out. She's worried. Nolan looked down into his drink, swirling the ice. I'm good, he said. Just been processing a lot. Jess hesitated. She mentioned, you might need medication again. PTSD stuff. He looked at her. No flare of anger. Just cold clarity. So, that's what she's been saying? Jess shrugged. I'm not judging. But yeah, she's been carrying a lot. Reed's been helping her through it. The name landed like static in his ear. Reed? He asked casually. Jess nodded. They're close, you know that. Always been tight. Tight enough to forge documents together. Tight enough to use his military record as a financial stepping stone. He gave a short laugh. Guess I've been more out of it than I thought. She touched his arm. You're not alone, okay? You just gotta be honest. He smiled. Yeah, I will be. But that night, he deleted every shared friend from his socials. Changed passwords. Disconnected every camera Trina had ever seen in the house, and activated 3 new ones she hadn't. The isolation worked in his favor. They thought he was broken, unaware, passive. But when you're underestimated, you move freer, slower, sharper. And when the strike lands, they never see it coming. The Valor United Gala was a month away. It was being marketed as a historic milestone in veteran community partnerships. Red, white, and gold banners now hung around the city. Billboards featured Reed Mercer, hand on a vet's shoulder, with Trina smiling nearby as community director. Every time Nolan saw one, he took a picture. Not for memories, for evidence. The timeline needed to be airtight. At Seth's safe house, the data wall was growing. One screen played back silent footage of Reed and Trina at the mill. Another showed money transfers. The newest, a $250,000 donation from a defense contractor with ties to 3 fake shell companies, all routed through Valor United. They're getting arrogant, Seth muttered. This stuff isn't even buried that deep anymore. Because they think they're safe, Nolan said. And they think I'm done. Mason entered, dropping a flash drive. Security schematics for the gala venue. If you want to go public, that's your night. Nolan nodded. That's when they'll both be handed their awards. Cameras will be rolling. Crowd full of donors, press, city officials. He turned to the footage of Trina, adjusting her necklace while sipping from a champagne glass. That's when the masks come off. Seth tilted his head. You sure you want to be there in person? Nolan's eyes stayed locked on the screen. I want to watch them break. In real time. Later that night, back home, Trina was giddy, humming a tune in the bathroom. We'll be on stage together, she said through the door. Can you believe it? Nolan folded his suit jacket carefully. Hung it beside hers. I can, he said. You've earned it. She laughed, clueless. But beneath all that gold was the blood-red truth waiting to be revealed. And she was about to bleed for it. Friday evening, Trina hosted one of her ladies' wine nights. For women, 2 bottles deep, laughter bouncing off the living room walls like bad theater. Nolan sat outside on the porch, headphones in, pretending to scroll his phone. Inside, the house was wired. He listened through the live feed, Trina's voice floating through the mic hidden in the floor lamp. You have no idea how exhausting it is pretending to care. I swear, if I hear, thank you for your service, one more time, I'll scream. The others laughed. And Nolan? He's like a ghost. Won't even look me in the eye half the time. You think he knows? One asked. No. I could sleep with Reed in our bed and he wouldn't notice. The wine glasses clinked. I'm telling you, once this nonprofit expands, I'm done playing house. We'll have real money, DC connections. I won't need the camouflage anymore. Nolan didn't blink, didn't shift. Just tapped his phone twice, marking the timestamp. Later, when the guests were gone and the lights dimmed, Trina brushed past him like nothing had been said. She leaned down and kissed the top of his head. You're up late. Couldn't sleep, he said, without looking up. I'm heading to bed. Long day tomorrow. He waited until she was gone, then pulled out his tablet. Saved the recording. Her mask was cracking, not just in front of him, but in front of others. And that was perfect. Because soon, she'd have an audience she didn't choose. And every fake smile would finally cost her. It came on a Sunday afternoon, quiet, unassuming. Nolan was sitting in the garage reviewing donor lists when Seth's message popped up on screen. Big one. Just cleared. 500K. Offshore. Trina signed it. Code ID Red Wolf. Red Wolf was a military ops name Trina once heard Nolan mention. She used it as an alias to route funds through a Belize-based shell account. She hadn't just forged his name. She was stealing his language, his past, his battlefield. Nolan breathed through his nose, slow and calm. Every detail mattered now. He called Mason. They just moved $500,000. Time to make it real. Mason responded without hesitation. You want the state auditor's office brought in? No, not yet. We let them stack their crimes first. Every file, every document, let them get deeper. Then we pull the floor out from under them. That night, Trina cooked lasagna, set the table, lit candles. You've been so different lately, she said, pouring wine. It feels like the old you. He smiled. That's because I'm starting to feel like me again. She reached across the table, touched his hand. I want to believe we can make it work. Nolan looked into her eyes. Calm, unreadable. We can. We just need to be honest with each other. She smiled, convinced she still had him wrapped. After she fell asleep, Nolan took the house laptop she never used and searched for files marked Project Red Wolf. Found a zip folder. Inside, signed NDAs, fake employee IDs, contractor invoices, all tied to Valor United. He uploaded it all to a secure drive labeled Truth Drop. When the time came, this folder wouldn't just expose her. It would bury the empire they built. Monday morning, Nolan sat quietly in a diner off I-40, coffee steaming in front of him, a recorder in his coat pocket. Across the booth sat Carrie Whitman, Trina's coworker. Ex-best friend, now blacklisted from Valor United for compliance issues. She sipped her coffee, eyes darting. You didn't hear this from me, she said. But Reed and Trina? They've been coaching new hires to funnel checks through side accounts. Bonuses, incentives, it's all off books. Nolan leaned in. You ever sign anything? Yeah, once. I was dumb. They said it was just standard paperwork. Next thing I know, my name's attached to a consulting fee I never got paid for. Would you testify? She blinked. Hell no. Nolan slid a USB across the table. You won't have to. Just plug this into your office computer. It'll do the rest. She stared at it, hesitated. You think they'll go down for this? I don't think. I know. Back home, Nolan walked in to find Trina at her desk, typing away. She minimized the window quickly, smiling like nothing was off. You're home early. Stopped for lunch. Good, she said. Big week. The gala's going to be massive. Reed said the mayor might show. Nolan smiled. He should. You two have worked hard for this. She nodded, thrilled. It's going to be the night we've been working toward. Nolan stepped closer, brushing her hair behind her ear. It'll be a night no one forgets. She beamed, kissed him quickly, but as she turned, Nolan glanced at the screen she'd minimized. She forgot to fully close it. For a second, he saw it, an email draft titled, Post-Gala Exit Strategy. He memorized the address. They weren't just planning a night of glory. They were planning their escape. But they built their empire on stolen time. And Nolan had just pressed fast forward. The sun beat down hard in the old footage. Nolan watched it in his garage, eyes locked on the grainy screen. Helmet cam. Afghanistan, 2010. His unit was pinned down in a crumbling village, outnumbered, supplies gone. 3 men shot. 1 dead. He remembered the silence more than the chaos. One clip showed him dragging a wounded man through dust and glass, laying down fire without blinking. That day had taught him something. Emotion gets you killed. Precision gets you home. Now, he paused the video, still holding the dog tags of Staff Sergeant Ruiz, his closest brother in the field. Ruiz had died on that mission. Nolan had carried that loss for years. And now? His own wife had turned his scars into signatures. He tucked the tags away and opened the Truth Drop folder. Time to finish the recon phase. He emailed a copy of the shell accounts and donor links to Doug with the message. Need you to confirm these funds connect to active contracts. I'll handle the rest. He added a second attachment. Reed's call with a contractor discussing reducing payouts to disabled claimants to boost retention bonuses. It wasn't just fraud now. It was theft, from wounded vets. That night, Trina walked into the living room holding 2 glasses of red wine. To second chances? She asked. He raised his glass. To new beginnings. And as their glasses touched, Nolan's eyes didn't blink. He wasn't drinking to love. He was drinking to vengeance. The same focus that got him out of Kandahar would now bring down the enemy inside his home. Nolan sat across from Catherine Pellman, a sharp divorce attorney he'd met through a veterans legal network. She wore glasses, spoke like a scalpel, and didn't waste words. You said your wife forged your name on state and federal documents? Nolan slid a folder across her desk. Here's 3. Each tied to Valor United grant approvals, plus financial authorizations using my service record. She skimmed the pages. Forgery, wire fraud, misuse of federal identity protections. If this goes public, she's facing a minimum 5 to 10 years. I don't want jail yet, Nolan said. Not until after the gala. Catherine arched a brow. Why? Because I want everyone watching when it drops. She leaned back, intrigued. You want a public execution? Only metaphorically. She flipped through the documents again. And you're willing to stay silent until then? He nodded. But I want the divorce papers ready. The moment it breaks, she served. Lock up all shared assets. Shut the door before she can run. Catherine smiled faintly. That I can do. Before leaving, Nolan handed her one last sheet, a copy of the original prenup Trina had signed years ago, back when she thought marrying down meant financial security. It included a clause she forgot. If infidelity or fraudulent behavior is proven, all claims to shared marital assets are forfeited. Catherine whistled. She's going to lose everything. She never had anything, Nolan said. She just borrowed it. That night, Trina texted him while he was at the gym. Miss you. Home late. Donor dinner ran long, he replied. All good. Take your time. She had no idea she'd be coming home to a house that no longer belonged to her. The law was now his weapon, and it was loaded. At exactly 3:15 a.m., Nolan triggered the house alarm manually from his phone. The piercing screech echoed through the hallways. Trina shot out of bed, dazed. What the? Nolan burst from the guest room barefoot, phone in hand. I think someone's trying to break in. She panicked, grabbed her phone, keys, and ran straight out the front door without even checking on him. Nolan stood in the kitchen and watched through the window as she got into her car and sped down the street. She never once looked back. He disabled the alarm, exhaled. Test complete. The next morning, she returned pretending nothing had happened. You okay? She asked, sipping her smoothie. Last night was wild. He looked at her. Yeah, you bolted fast. I thought someone was in the house. I was freaking out. You didn't check on me. She laughed it off. I knew you'd be fine. You're trained for this stuff. He nodded slowly. Right. She kissed his cheek and went back to her emails. Nolan walked to his office and opened the surveillance playback. Every angle recorded. Her panic. Her escape. The speed at which she left the man she loved behind. Later that day, Doug confirmed it. The $500,000 transfer was being tracked. The money was connected to a fake property rehab project. The house was rigged. The fund trail exposed. The exit plan caught in draft. Now, her loyalty had failed the last test. And Nolan? He didn't need love. He needed leverage. And she just handed him the last piece. 2 weeks before the gala, Nolan made his first move. An anonymous envelope arrived at the office of the Raleigh Sentinel, the city's most respected independent newspaper. Inside, a USB drive, a burner phone number, and a sticky note that read, You'll want to verify line 17 in the state contract files. Start with Valor United. The story writes itself. The reporter who opened it, Jill Ramirez, had covered corruption stories for a decade. She knew a live wire when she touched one. That same evening, she texted the burner number. Jill, this is real. Nolan, more than real. You'll find forged veteran records, shell accounts, and donor laundering. All under the Valor United name. Jill, how deep? Nolan, governor's office might be connected. Depends how far you're willing to look. Nolan left it at that. No names. No threats. Just breadcrumbs. At home, Trina poured herself wine and turned on a streaming documentary about nonprofits and war crimes. The irony, Nolan said, sitting beside her. She laughed, not catching it. It's all exaggerated. Most nonprofits are clean. Sure they are. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You're finally loosening up again. I miss this. He wrapped an arm around her and smiled. So did I. The TV played in the background as Nolan glanced at her phone screen. A text from Reed. We're in the clear. Nobody's looking. Gala will be perfect. He memorized the timestamp. They thought they were invisible, untouchable. They didn't know the first strike had already landed. And when the story broke, it wouldn't just be news. It would be war. Carrie Whitman hadn't planned to betray Trina. But she'd been cut off, tossed aside, and left to carry legal risk for a scheme she never believed in. So when the reporters showed up asking questions, she didn't run. She sat down and talked. I don't have documents, Carrie said, but I've seen them. Reed forged a fake board approval. Trina notarized it under someone else's name. Joe Ramirez recorded everything. Would you testify? Carrie hesitated. Off the record, yes. On the record? I need protection. You might get it. But it's going to blow open. Meanwhile, Nolan had the footage. Carrie had agreed to wear a wire during one last friendly lunch with Trina. At the bistro, Trina sipped wine and gushed about DC expansion. You really think this nonprofit's gonna go national? Carrie asked, playing dumb. Trina smiled. It already is. The funding's locked. Reed's handling legal. I'm the face. All we need now is a clean gala. And what if someone leaks something? Trina scoffed. Then we bury it with cash. Or deny everything. I've watched Reed handle worse. Carrie tilted her head. Even with no one still around? Trina rolled her eyes. Please. He's a shell. He's broken. If he had any clue, we'd be in trouble. But he doesn't. Later that night, Nolan listened to the playback. He didn't blink. Just labeled the audio file, Final Nail, Confession.mp3, the arrogance. The overconfidence. The complete dismissal of him as a threat. It wasn't insulting. It was perfect. Because when people think you're powerless, they never brace for the hit. Nolan stood outside the gala venue the night before the event. Mason handed him the final USB drive. Everything's on there. Surveillance footage. Contracts. Financial trails. The whole op. Good, Nolan said. This is the one that burns the house down. He walked through the building empty now, but tomorrow it would be full of donors, politicians, and cameras. He studied the lighting, the exits, the media booth. Trina would be standing center stage, accepting an award for outstanding public service. Reed would introduce her. The irony was almost poetic. That night, back home, Trina lit candles, made steak, poured his favorite bourbon. I thought we should celebrate early, she said, sitting close to him. Tomorrow's going to change everything. It will, he agreed. She reached for his hand. You've been amazing lately. Whatever darkness was there, it feels like it's gone. He looked at her. It is. She smiled and kissed him. For a moment, Nolan allowed it. He let the lie live one more night. Because tomorrow, there would be no coming back. They danced in the kitchen. She laughed when he spun her. The playlist she used on their honeymoon played in the background. But as she kissed him again and whispered, I'm glad I never gave up on us, Nolan's face didn't move. He kissed her back, then pulled away slowly. You should get some rest, he said. Big day tomorrow. She nodded, her eyes soft. You'll be right beside me? I wouldn't miss it. He watched her walk upstairs. Quiet. Content. And then he turned back to the folder in his bag. Tomorrow wasn't about closure. It was about consequence. And by the time the lights came on, she'd know exactly who she'd been dancing with. The gala buzzed with camera flashes and polite applause. Waiters drifted between guests with trays of champagne. Beneath the glittering chandelier, Valor United's logo beamed from a massive screen. Trina stood near the stage in a fitted black dress, shaking hands with city officials. Her laugh was polished, her smile locked on like it was carved in marble. Reed hovered close, his tux crisp, eyes scanning the crowd like he was already elected to something. Nolan entered through the side corridor wearing a dark charcoal suit. Clean. Controlled. He didn't make a sound. He didn't need to. The USB with the compiled evidence was already in the hands of three key people: a lead investigative reporter, the state auditor's liaison, and a federal agent tied to the VA's fraud division. All had been instructed to wait until the final award presentation. He moved to the back of the ballroom, posted up near the camera crew. Silent. Watching. The crowd settled. A host stepped to the mic. Tonight, we honor two extraordinary individuals. Nolan's eyes narrowed. Reed stepped forward to a ripple of applause. It's been my life's mission to give back to those who've sacrificed the most. But tonight's spotlight belongs to someone who's been my rock, my partner, in the heart of Valor United. Trina Briggs. Trina walked onto the stage, eyes glistening. Applause thundered. She looked radiant, untouchable. She took the mic. Thank you. This isn't just for me. It's for every veteran who gave more than they got. And for every person who believed we could do better. Nolan checked his watch. 7:41 p.m. 3 minutes until detonation. He smiled faintly. And then the world would finally see what was buried under the glitter. At exactly 7:44 p.m., Jill Ramirez stepped outside the ballroom with her editor. She opened the sealed envelope that had been hand-delivered 30 minutes earlier. Inside, a photo of a man. ID, service record, 2 blood-spattered legal forms. His name was Anthony Voss, a disabled vet whose identity had been stolen, whose benefits had been drained by Valor United 6 months prior. But what Jill saw next made her stop breathing. Attached was a printed court deposition. Anthony Voss had committed suicide. The benefit denial paperwork? Signed by Trina Briggs. The photo? Taken by Nolan 2 years ago, during a PTSD support retreat. Voss had trusted him. Nolan had introduced him to Valor United, believing it was legit. The rage Jill felt wasn't professional. It was personal. Inside the ballroom, the screen glitched. Then it changed. What was supposed to be a pre-recorded thank you montage flickered into something else. A voice began to play over the loudspeakers, clear, clipped, unmistakable, Trina's voice. From the bistro recording. Please. He's a shell. He's broken. If he had any clue, we'd be in trouble. But he doesn't. The crowd murmured. Whispers spread like gas fumes. The screen lit up again. Documents. Bank transfers. Signatures. Government logos. Then, Anthony Voss's name. His photo. His death certificate. A headline appeared across the screen. The price of fraud. The death Valor United buried. Nolan stepped out of the shadows. For the first time, he let Trina see him, dead center of the room, watching her with unblinking eyes. Her face paled. She looked at Reed. Reed bolted off stage. Trina stood frozen. Nolan didn't move. Didn't speak. He just watched the masks burn. The twist wasn't that they were guilty. It was that Nolan was the one who brought them to the stage. And the show wasn't over. The ballroom erupted. People rushed out. Reporters flooded toward the stage. Trina tried to speak, mic dead, hand shaking. Someone in the back shouted, "Is this true?" Cameras rolled. Flash after flash. But Trina's eyes were locked on Nolan. She stepped down slowly, heels clicking like gunshots on marble. "Nolan," she whispered. "What did you do?" He stepped forward, calm. "I exposed you." You set me up?" "No. You did that all on your own." Reed shoved through a side door, but 2 plainclothes agents blocked his path. "Mr. Mercer, we need a moment of your time." He tried to run. Bad move. They tackled him to the ground, cuffs clicking. Gasps echoed. Trina turned confused, broken. "What is this? What's happening?" Nolan reached into his coat and handed her a manila envelope. Inside, divorce papers, printed screenshots, the prenup clause. Her hands trembled. "You're divorcing me." "Here, everything you ever took. It's done." She looked up at him, mascara smudged. "You loved me. You said I did. And then you used my name to rob the people I bled for." She collapsed into a nearby chair. People whispered. Phones filmed. Her empire dissolved in real time. Later, outside, Jill caught up with Nolan. "You knew Voss, didn't you?" "I did." "Why didn't you leak this sooner?" "Because the story needed an ending they couldn't spin." She nodded. "They're done. But this is going national." He handed her one last file. "This isn't just 2 people. It's a system." She flipped it open. Her eyes widened. "You want to burn it all." He looked at her one last time. "I want it to never happen again." Then Nolan disappeared into the night. While behind him, the fire kept spreading. The media exploded within hours. Local news led with the headline, Veteran advocacy gala erupts in scandal, fraud charges filed. But by morning, it had gone national. CNN, MSNBC, even military forums and whistleblower pages had picked up the video. Nolan's anonymous footage of Trina's confession and the Valor United documents had been mirrored across multiple platforms. Reddit threads titled, "She used her husband's trauma to build an empire," went viral. Doug called Nolan from D.C., his voice tense. "We've started backtracing Valor United's grant usage. It's not just you or Voss. There are at least 11 other veterans listed in fund requests, and 6 of them never received a dime. Are they alive?" Nolan asked. 3 are. One's homeless in Ohio. Another filed a fraud complaint last year and was ignored. Nolan exhaled slowly. And the rest? Doug didn't answer. That told him everything. Trina and Reed weren't just thieves. They were predators, using the names of the broken, the forgotten, because no one would ever question it. Doug continued. "The Inspector General wants to meet. Quietly. They know this isn't a one-off. You've just uncovered a machine." Nolan stared out the window of a rented cabin, tucked in the hills just north of Asheville. He hadn't gone home since the gala. "They buried men like Voss," Nolan said. "We're not stopping here." Doug was silent for a moment. "You're becoming something bigger than this, Nolan. This isn't just revenge anymore." "No," Nolan said. "It's war." And this time, it wasn't just for him. Inside a locked conference room at the federal building in Charlotte, Nolan sat at a long table opposite 3 officials, each representing different arms of government oversight. On the screen behind them, the Valor United chart was up. Faces, names, flow charts, wire paths. Red lines ran between shell companies, front orgs, and government payouts. "This," one official said, tapping the board, "is bigger than 2 con artists." Nolan nodded once. It always was. An investigator pointed out a subsidiary listed under a D.C. lobbying firm. "Reed's company funneled nearly $2 million through here. They used your name and Trina's fabricated PTSD narratives to secure that funding. False media placements helped build credibility." Another added, "We also found a silent partner. Someone with connections to the State Development Committee Veteran Programs Division." Nolan's jaw tightened. "Name? Harvey Trent." Nolan's stomach dropped. Harvey had spoken at Nolan's unit reunion just a year prior. Former Marine, now a state policy director. A man Nolan had shaken hands with. Trusted. He leaned forward. "You're saying this went all the way to the funding board?" "We believe so. And we need your help to break it." Nolan looked at the web of names and realized the truth. Trina and Reed were never masterminds. They were pawns. Faces. Distractions. The rot went deeper. "I've got one more drive," Nolan said. Everything Reed said when he thought no one was listening. "You wire him?" "No. I made him talk." He pulled out the final drive. "You'll want to hear this." The agents nodded. "We're opening an official task force." Nolan stood slowly. "Just make sure Voss's name is the first one cleared. Because this wasn't about closure anymore. This was about consequences." Back in Raleigh, Trina sat in a corner booth of a coffee shop, dressed down in a plain hoodie and sunglasses. Across from her sat a woman she barely knew, Celia Park, a local PR fixer hired at the last minute. "I need you to kill this story," Trina said under her breath. "Shift the narrative. Say it's a smear campaign. My husband was mentally unstable. He planted everything." Celia sipped her drink, unimpressed. "It's a little late for narrative control. Half the internet thinks you're a sociopath. The other half thinks you're part of a human trafficking ring." Trina flinched. Celia leaned in. "You want advice?" "Lawyer up. Fast." Trina pulled out her phone. "What about the files? The originals? If we delete those, they're everywhere. Cloud backups, media archives, mirror drives. You can't bury something that viral." "I have dirt on people," Trina hissed. "People above Reed. People no one's mentioned yet." Celia looked up, eyes sharp. "Then you better start naming names." Meanwhile, from a nearby table, a young man in a ball cap and hoodie quietly packed up his laptop and left. He wasn't a journalist. He was Mason's contact, a surveillance tech Nolan had planted earlier that week. And the audio? Clear as glass. Later that night, Nolan listened to it all. Trina trying to twist reality, trying to burn others, trying to crawl out of the grave she dug. He smiled faintly. Desperation looks good on you. The audio was sent to the federal task force within the hour. The walls weren't just closing in. They were locking. At 2:17 a.m., Nolan stood in the corner of Seth's secure lab, watching lines of encrypted code scroll across 3 monitors. Seth wiped sweat from his brow. "We're in." A fourth screen opened, an offshore banking dashboard registered under a foundation called Briggs Future Initiatives. Nolan narrowed his eyes. That's not even subtle. The account listed 3 authorized users, Trina, Reed, and a third name Nolan didn't recognize, C. Mendez. Who the hell is Mendez? Nolan asked. Seth clicked into the user's metadata. He's listed as a consultant on international outreach partnerships. Lies in D.C. shows up in 4 other shell foundations we flagged. Nolan leaned in. Find out who he works with. Already on it. Below the names were the funds, $3.4 million, spread across multiple project codes, most tagged as closed-loop charitable disbursements. Translation: money no one would ever expect back. Seth grinned. You want to drain it? Nolan shook his head. No. I want to freeze it. Within minutes, Doug and the federal team were looped in. An emergency injunction was filed. A formal asset freeze hit Mendez's access within the hour. It was the first time Trina's funds had been cut off permanently. By sunrise, her credit cards declined, one by one. And by noon, Reed's firm's entire financial access system was locked for investigation. At a Starbucks across town, Trina tried to buy a coffee and was met with, "Sorry, card declined." She blinked, tried again. Same result. "Do you want to try another card?" Trina forced a smile. "No. Must be a glitch." But when she checked her banking app, account disabled, pending fraud review. And just like that, her illusion of power cracked. They weren't just bleeding. They'd been cut off at the root. The file was buried deep in Reed's archives, encrypted and disguised as a dummy budget report. Seth cracked it after a 2-hour brute force key rotation. When the file opened, Nolan watched in silence. A recorded Zoom call timestamped 6 months earlier. Reed was speaking with 3 men, a retired senator, a former DHS official, and Carlos Mendez, the offshore contact. "We're expanding operations to absorb other vet charities," Mendez said. "Start with the smaller ones. The ones run by actual vets. Once we have their data, you know the drill." Reed smirked. "Make it look like a merger, get them on payroll, then let them fade." "Exactly," Mendez replied. Then Reed added, laughing, "And we've got Trina managing the narrative. She's good at cleaning things up. Pretty face. Veteran's wife. Public loves that." Nolan's jaw tensed. He didn't speak. He let the file play to the end, another 15 minutes of illegal coordination, manipulation, and exploitation. He copied it onto 5 separate drives. One was sent to the DOJ, 2 to journalists, 1 to Doug, and 1 was placed in a sealed envelope marked, "In case anything happens to me." He stored it in a safety deposit box downtown. That night, Nolan stood alone on a rooftop overlooking the city. The wind was cold, quiet. He took out his phone, opened the video again, and watched Reed's arrogance, Mendez's dead stare, the plan unfolding like a blueprint of rot. He let it play once more, then deleted it from his device. Not out of fear, out of certainty. Because now, their own words would bury them deeper than he ever could. Trina's lawyer sat stiffly across from Catherine Pellman, Nolan's attorney. They met inside a quiet arbitration room downtown. No cameras, no press, just controlled demolition. "My client is willing to sign the divorce documents under the condition her public statements are limited and her current business ties are protected." Catherine didn't even blink. "No," the opposing lawyer exhaled. "Then what do you want?" "Full forfeiture of assets under the prenup. No delays. No statements. No lawsuits. And a gag order on media appearances." Trina, seated between them, looked gaunt, hollow. She'd aged 5 years and 5 weeks. "I was used," she said quietly. Catherine leaned in. "You were using people before Reed ever stepped in. That sympathy card won't fly." Trina's eyes drifted to the folder in front of her. Inside, a compiled list of every disabled vet Valor United had defrauded. Faces, names, redacted death reports. She whispered, "What happens to me?" Catherine didn't answer, because Nolan already had a full digital copy of all legal evidence. Trina's voice, her authorizations, her profit shares was now in the hands of a congressional inquiry team. No plea deal would bury that. Nolan watched from a live feed in another room. When she finally picked up the pen and signed, he didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just stared at the screen. One phase of the mission was complete. But the war wasn't over. Because now the people above Trina, those in suits with government titles and sealed records, they were on the board. And they were next. A week after Trina signed the divorce papers, Nolan met with Agent Kim Osler inside a secure federal facility. No suits. No press. Just we're planning. She opened a manila file labeled, Harvey Trent, Confidential. Here's what we've got. Trent personally approved 16 grant applications submitted through Valor United's back channel. At least 9 of them involved false service records. Were for veterans who are now dead. Nolan flipped through the pages, photos of victims, digital fingerprints, a full money trail. All approved while Valor United was building their public image, she said. All signed within a 10-month span. And all with Harvey's initials. Osler nodded. We're moving on him. Quietly for now. Nolan pulled out a USB from his pocket. This has a full audio clip. Harvey and Reed, 3 months ago, discussing federal contracts and how to bury whistleblowers. Osler raised her brow. You recorded this? He was drunk. At a charity poker night. Forgot I was there. She leaned back in her chair. You've been 10 steps ahead this whole time. No, Nolan said calmly. I've just been listening while they talk. He stood, ready to leave. Where will you be when the warrants drop? Osler asked. Nolan looked her in the eyes. Somewhere I can see it all happen. That evening, alone in his car outside his old neighborhood, Nolan opened his calendar. He clicked the final marked date, November 11th, Veterans Day Gala, Federal Honors Ceremony. Harvey was scheduled to speak. Mendez too. It would be nationally broadcast. And that's when Nolan planned to detonate the rest. Not with noise. With facts. Receipts. And silence that screamed louder than guilt. Nolan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his collar. The suit was black. Not flashy. Sharp enough to be noticed. Quiet enough not to ask for it. He didn't wear medals. Didn't bring the past with him. Just carried the weight of it behind his eyes. Mason met him at the lot. Got your signal mapped. We're patched into the live feed room. If anything gets cut, we go wide on the backup channel. Press. Lined up. Jill's ready. Military times, too. You'll be the source. Clean. Verified. Nolan nodded, silent. Focused. The Veterans Day event was packed. Photographers crowded the entrance, city leaders shaking hands like they weren't complicit. Harvey Trent smiled wide for the cameras, clapping backs, offering mock humility. Nolan walked through the crowd like smoke, seen but ignored, until he reached his seat near the front, directly facing the stage. Trina wasn't there. She knew better now. But Reed? Reed had flown in from a so-called rehab retreat, pretending the fraud fallout hadn't touched him. He shook Harvey's hand. Nolan watched them both, motionless. At 8:09 p.m., the program began. The host spoke proudly of Valor United's contributions to rebuilding trust between veterans and their government. Harvey stepped up to deliver his speech. And right then, Nolan tapped send on his phone. Screens across the ballroom glitched once. Then came the video, Harvey and Mendez. Reed laughing. Financial docs. The Zoom footage. Whispers turned to gasps. Cameras flashed. Harvey stopped speaking. Reed stood frozen. Nolan stayed seated. Unmoved. The hosts might cut out. Agents moved toward the stage. Harvey tried to speak again, but the room was already gone, absorbed in the screens. One line echoed loudest. We bury whistleblowers. You just have to make it look like paperwork. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. And Nolan didn't have to raise his voice. The truth did it for him. By 9:10 p.m., Reed Mercer was in handcuffs. Agents from the DOJ and VA's fraud task force closed in on him behind the ballroom curtains. No chase. No shouting. Just stunned silence and clicking cameras. Trina, watching from her apartment, dropped her wine glass. She knew it was over. Harvey Trent was taken from a private conference room where he was preparing his statement of integrity. They walked him past donors, past veterans he never thought would outlive his lies. Some of them clapped as he was walked out. Carlos Mendez? He was picked up at Reagan National Airport, boarding a flight to Panama. The arrest was clean. Border control had been tipped off hours before. His laptop was seized, his burner phones bagged. News broke fast. Valor United scandal exposes federal collusion. Millions laundered through veteran funds. Former soldier brings down corrupt network. Nolan's name wasn't in the first few headlines. But it didn't need to be. Inside a safe house nearby, he watched it all unfold on TV with Seth, Mason, and Doug. 3 in 1 hour, Mason muttered. Hell of a day. Doug poured 2 glasses of bourbon. To Voss. And the others they buried. Nolan took one, raised it without speaking, then drank. There was no celebration. Only the cold satisfaction that came with seeing it through. He stepped outside for air. The wind was crisp. No crowd. No lights. Just the quiet kind of peace that doesn't come from forgiveness, but from finishing the mission. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was surgical. And Nolan had just made the final cut. The next morning, Nolan's name was everywhere. Not because he sought credit, but because the people wouldn't let it stay anonymous. Someone leaked the origin of the investigation. Someone who'd seen him sitting calmly while Reed was cuffed. Someone who knew the story had a face. Veteran forums exploded. Former Black Ops vet uncovered $8 million fraud ring. He didn't yell. He just listened. And then he buried them. By noon, journalists were calling Catherine Pellman nonstop. She answered only once. He won't be doing interviews. This was never about press. It was about justice. But the world kept watching. A thread on X, formerly Twitter, went viral, showing side-by-sides, Trina smiling in gala photos. Nolan standing behind her, silent. Her name in charity headlines, his in sealed court files, working behind the scenes. Hashtag Justice in Silence trended for 2 days. Trina, meanwhile, was shunned by everyone she'd once smiled with. Donors vanished. Contacts deleted her number. Public statements from Valor United's board declared her a rogue player. She tried to speak out once. Posted a shaky video. I was manipulated. I didn't understand what they were doing, but comments were ruthless. You forged signatures. You laughed while talking about burying broken men. Your ex saved more lives in silence than you ever did on stage. The internet wasn't forgiving. And Nolan? He stayed quiet. Watched from a distance. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel hunted. He felt still. Sometimes justice doesn't come with applause. Sometimes it comes with silence. And that silence is finally yours. 1 week later, Nolan received a notification from his attorney. All assets under Trina Briggs have been officially frozen pending federal trial. Bank accounts, real estate, car leases, investment portfolios. Gone. Her emergency appeal was denied. Nolan read the document, then tucked it into a drawer without emotion. It wasn't about her pain. It was about stopping what she helped build. That evening, Catherine called. Reed accepted a plea deal. He's offering names for a lighter sentence. Mendez is refusing to cooperate. Trina's trial is being fast-tracked. Good, Nolan said. Let them turn on each other. Catherine hesitated. You're allowed to testify, if you want. Voss's family is attending. I'll be there, Nolan said. But I'm not speaking for headlines. I'm speaking for closure. Later that night, he drove to the edge of the city to a plot of land once promised to Valor United for a veteran housing complex. Nothing had ever been built. Just empty space. Abandoned signs. He parked, walked across the cold dirt, and stood in silence. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. It was from Voss's sister, handwritten, smudged ink. You were the last person he trusted. You gave that trust meaning. Thank you. He folded the note again, placed it under a rock near the gate, and walked away, because now it wasn't about burning things down. It was about building something new. Nolan didn't return to the city. He disappeared into the Blue Ridge Mountains, settling into a small, quiet cabin tucked between tall trees and fading red leaves. No phone service. No interviews. No echo chambers. Just peace. The cabin wasn't fancy, but it had what he needed: silence, air, and space. Every morning, he walked the forest trail with coffee. Every night, He read under dim yellow lights. Sometimes he thought of Trina, not with anger, just distance. She'd chosen her path, and now he'd chosen his. Mason visited once, dropping off a case of supplies. "You going full monk out here?" he joked. "Something like that. You sure you're not coming back?" Nolan sipped his coffee, watching leaves fall outside. "I didn't come here to run. I came here to stop." Mason nodded. "Doug's setting up a new task force. They want you consulting." "I'll think about it." They sat in silence. Before Mason left, he handed Nolan a small envelope. Inside, an old photo of their unit. Nolan, Ruiz, Voss. Younger, lighter. "They'd be proud," Mason said. "They'd want more than pride," Nolan replied. "They'd want protection." Mason paused. "So what now?" Nolan didn't answer, but he looked toward the tree line, toward the future, and breathed deep. Not as a soldier, not as a husband, but as a man who finally reclaimed his story. The letters started coming 2 weeks after the arrests. Mason had forwarded Nolan's P.O. box address to the Veterans Task Force. He hadn't expected anything personal, just logistics, maybe reports. But what came were handwritten letters, dozens, some typed, most scribbled in shaky pen, some signed, others anonymous. They came from across the country, survivors, spouses, sons of dead men. One was from a man in Montana. "They used my name for 4 grants. I never saw a dollar. I live in a trailer now. But watching what you did, I stood up straighter that day." Another came from a widow in Houston. He died thinking no one believed him, that he was crazy. "You made them listen." Nolan sat at his table in the cabin, the fire cracking low, a box of these letters beside him. He didn't cry, didn't speak. He just read them, one by one, until the sun came up. The last was from a name he didn't expect, Carrie Whitman. She had testified, quietly, risked her job, her safety. "I just wanted to say, you were the only one who didn't ask me to lie. You just asked me to do the right thing." At the bottom, she'd scribbled a postscript. "If you ever start something real, something that protects people for real, call me. I'll work for free." He folded the note, slid it into a new file marked Project RU-12, named after Ruiz, and the 12 veterans listed on Valor United's forged filings. This wasn't a revenge file. This was a beginning. Downtown Raleigh. A quiet law office. Catherine sat across from Nolan, sliding a thick folder toward him. All accounts cleared. Settlement closed. State audit finished. You now have access to the restitution fund. How much? $1.7 million. Nolan blinked. That much. Class action suits. Civil penalties. The feds threw their weight behind the claim. Most of it came from assets seized off Reed and Trina. He flipped through the itemized breakdown. Names. Transactions. Triggers. Everything legal. Everything clean. They asked if you wanted the payout personally. "No," Nolan said. "It doesn't belong to me." Catherine smiled faintly. "Then what do you want done with it?" Nolan stood, reached into his coat, handed her a page he'd printed weeks ago. The letterhead read, "The Ruiz Foundation for Veterans at Risk Mission, to protect those who've served from those who profit. A housing program. A legal defense fund. A support network." Catherine scanned it, impressed. "This is real. It has to be. Do you want press on this?" "No. I just want results." She paused. "You're building something, Nolan." He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. The next day, the foundation was quietly filed and approved. By Friday, Nolan received the first volunteer application. It was from Carrie Whitman. Under position requested, she'd written, "Field coordinator. Damage control. Whatever you need." And in the notes, "I'm all in." The email came late at night. No sender listed. Just a download link and one file, Trina_final.mov. Nolan opened it on his secure drive. The video began in a sterile courtroom. Trina sat beside her lawyer, eyes hollow, her once perfect composure gone. She was pale. No makeup, just broken skin and broken posture. She spoke softly. I made decisions I can't undo. I thought I was helping. I let it all spiral." She paused, looking into the camera, not at the court, at him. "If Nolan ever sees this, I'm sorry, not just for the lies, but for making him forget who he was." Silence. Then she whispered, "He was always better than all of us." The feed ended. Nolan didn't move for a while. He saved the file, not out of sentiment, but to remember what unchecked betrayal looks like, how far a person can fall. Then he deleted it, without hesitation, because forgiveness didn't live here. Not anymore. He stepped outside into the wind, watching the trees sway. One phase had ended. Another was about to begin. And this time, it wouldn't be built on pain. It would be built on purpose. The cabin sat quiet that morning, dew frosting the windows. Nolan heard it first, a sharp knock. Not frantic, just firm. He opened the door to find a boy, maybe 11, standing with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a newspaper in the other. "You him?" the boy asked. "Depends who you're looking for." "The guy who took down those fake vet people. My uncle said you were out here." Nolan studied the kid. "What's your name?" "Cal. You come alone?" "Yeah. I just wanted to meet you. My dad served. Afghanistan. Lost his job 2 years ago. They told him he wasn't disabled enough to qualify." Nolan motioned for him to sit on the steps. "What happened?" "He started drinking. Mom left. He's trying, but he doesn't trust anyone now. He said the whole system's broken." Nolan nodded. "He's not wrong." The boy reached into his pack and pulled out a sketch, a hand-drawn, clumsy, but full of effort. It was a folded concept page for a vet house. Crayon blue walls. Food pantry. Beds. Showers. "I want to build this one day," Cal said. "Can you help me?" Nolan took the paper, looked at it, then folded it carefully and slid it into his jacket pocket. "I already am. A private courtroom. No cameras. Just a quiet hearing that wouldn't make the news." Harvey Trent sat across from a federal judge, trying to salvage what was left of his legacy. "I want to cooperate fully," he said. "I can provide names, funders. There's a list. You'll find deeper pockets than mine." The judge didn't blink. "You had a duty to protect those who served. Instead, you sold their names like stock. I was pressured. You were paid." Harvey's lawyer placed a binder on the table. It contained 2 years' worth of internal emails, contracts, laundering trails. All of it had come from Nolan. At the back of the room, Nolan stood, arms folded. Silent. Trent glanced at him, eyes bloodshot. "You don't understand what it's like to get caught in something you can't escape." Nolan didn't move. Then said one sentence. "You weren't caught. You were chosen." The judge sentenced him to 20 years. By the end of the year, the RU-12 Foundation had opened 2 legal clinics and signed off on 3 microgrants for displaced veterans. No gala. No press. Just work. Carrie ran point in D.C., fielding casework and pushing for protections at the legislative level. Mason handled operations. Doug stayed on as federal liaison. Nolan worked from the cabin, quietly reviewing every incoming file, double-checking every signature. Each night, he lit a fire and wrote one letter. Not to Trina. Not to Reed. To Voss's sister. To Ruiz's widow. To the names he'd once carried on missions, now carried in memory. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't offer perfect words. He just told the truth, 1 page at a time. It was dusk when Nolan stood shirtless in front of the mirror. The scar across his right shoulder, deep, jagged, earned in a firefight near Kandahar, caught the amber light. Trina once said she hated looking at it. Said it reminded her of things she didn't want to remember. No? Nolan touched the scar gently. Not with shame. Not pride. Just acceptance. It wasn't ugly. It was proof. Of survival. Of betrayal. Of what he chose to do with the pain. He pulled his shirt on, opened the window, and listened to the wind through the trees. No applause. No headlines. Just peace. Hard-earned. And absolutely his. 1 month later, the first RU-12 housing unit opened just outside Fayetteville, North Carolina. It wasn't big. 10 rooms. 1 communal kitchen. A therapy center with real staff. A banner over the door read, "Welcome home." No more silence. Nolan stood just outside the ribbon-cutting crowd, not on stage, not in photos. Just watching. Carrie gave the speech. Doug shook hands with local leaders. Mason coordinated security. A young vet, 24, clean-shaven, anxious, stepped through the doors and stopped. He stared at the plaque on the wall. It read, "In honor of those who were forgotten, and those who refused to forget them." Then he turned, looked at Nolan from across the sidewalk, and nodded once. That was enough. Later, back at the cabin, Nolan opened the last file on his desk. Inside, a full write-up of the program's next expansion. Atlanta, Detroit, Albuquerque. 3 cities, 3 teams, 3 more chances to rewrite the narrative. He didn't flinch. He just circled a name on the list, Cal. The boy from the fence. Nolan had added him to the youth mentorship pilot, because every new mission needs a scout who remembers where the mines are. The air was cool. Mountains faded blue in the distance. The trees had started to turn, deep red, bright gold, fading orange. Nolan sat on the porch, sipping coffee. A dog, rescued, loyal, scruffy, lay at his feet. There were no alarms now. No hidden cameras. No backup plans. Just calm. Inside, the fireplace crackled. On the wall hung one photo, Ruiz, Voss, and Nolan. Alive. Laughing. Whole. He never replaced it. Because that version of him still mattered. The man who'd been betrayed? He had finished his mission. The man he'd become? He was building something better. The sound of tires on gravel made him glance up. A truck rolled into view, Carrie driving. She stepped out with files in hand. We got clearance for the DC grant, she said. RU-12's about to go national. Nolan smirked. Told you it'd work. You gonna come back? Eventually. He handed her a folder. Inside, a letter addressed to Congress. A full policy recommendation package. She scanned it, impressed. You wrote this. I lived it, he said. She looked at him one last time. You sure you're okay? Nolan leaned back in his chair. I'm still breathing. That's enough. Carrie smiled. We'll see you soon, Commander. As the truck drove off, Nolan stared at the sky. Clear. Bright. Wide open. No revenge left. Just purpose. And peace. And now to you, watching this from wherever you are. Let me ask you something real. If someone stole your story, your voice, your truth, would you stay quiet? Or would you take it back? One step at a time? Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching this from? If this story hit you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe so you don't miss the next mind-blowing revenge thriller. We're just getting started. Another epic story is already loading. Until then, take care of yourselves. Stay sharp. Stay watching. See you in the next one.